everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today for our Temporary Protected Status, TPS, and Deferred and Forced Departure, DED, for Venezuela engagement. My name is Emmy Ramirez, and I'm with the Public Engagement Division within the External Affairs Directorate, Office of Public Affairs. Joining me on the webinar today are my colleagues from the Office of Public Affairs, the Office of Policy and Strategy, Service Center Operations Directorate, and the Office of Intake and Document Production. As many of you are aware, on January 19th, 2021, former President Trump issued a memorandum providing DED and employment authorization for eligible Venezuelans. On March 9th, 2021, Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas designated Venezuela for TPS for 18 months, with the registration period starting on March 9th, 2021, and continuing until September 5th, 2021. We are hosting today's engagement to provide more information on both and answer questions that you may have. I'd like to take a few moments to go over the flow of today's engagement. Afterwards, I'll turn the webinar over to Sasha Ridley, Policy Analyst. After that, we will hear from Guillermo Roman Reef-Cole, Adjudications Officer, who will provide an overview of TPS, including eligibility requirements. And then Lauren Wise, Management and Program Analyst, who will go over how to apply and filing tips. After these presentations, we will take questions from the webinar Q&A box before closing out the event. We received questions, several questions in anticipation of today's engagement that we have incorporated within the presentation itself. Other questions will be addressed during the Q&A session of today's engagement. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. While we may not have time to respond individually to each question in the time that we have allotted here today, we are providing very detailed information in today's presentation. Please limit the Q&A box for questions. It's not intended for comments or general feedback. We do welcome your comments and feedback to our public engagement mailbox, and that email address is public.engagement@uscis.dhs.gov. Also, today's presentation materials will be available and posted to the USCIS electronic reading room. So before we get started, I do have some important administrative reminders. Members of the media who may be joining us, please note that this session is not for press purposes. If you have a media inquiry or need an on-the-record statement, you can contact our press office at media@uscis.dhs.gov. If we have any staff from congressional offices that might be joining us today, if you have any follow-up questions or any briefing requests, please contact the USCIS Legislative Affairs team, and they can be reached at USCIS Congressional Inquiries at uscis.dhs.gov. And again, if you have feedback or questions regarding today's event, you can send those to the public engagement mailbox, and that address is public.engagement@uscis.dhs.gov. And just as a final reminder, everyone's lines are muted at this time and will remain muted throughout the duration of today's event. We will take questions from the Q&A box later in the session. So now I will turn the call over to Sasha.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to be talking about deferred and forced departure for Venezuela. On January 9th, 2021, former President Trump issued a memorandum providing deferred and forced departure, which I'll refer to as DED, for eligible Venezuelans and providing work authorization beginning on January 20th, 2021. A notice in the Federal Register, published on March 9th, 2021, has information on eligibility and instructions on how eligible Venezuelans can obtain employment authorization documents if they so desire. DED is in the President's discretion to authorize as part of his constitutional power to conduct foreign relations. Although DED is not a specific immigration status, Individuals covered by DED are not subject to removal from the United States. Next slide, please. Eligible Venezuelan nationals and persons without nationality who last habitually resided in Venezuela covered under DED may remain in the United States for 18 months from January 19th, 2021 through July 20th, 2022. To be eligible for employment authorization under DED for Venezuela, you must be a national of Venezuela or a person without nationality who last habitually resided in Venezuela, who was present in the United States as of January 20th, 2021, and also continuously resided in the United States since January 20th of 2021. Next slide, please. Persons not covered under DED. DED for Venezuelans does not cover any individual who voluntarily returned to Venezuela or country of last habitual residence outside of the United States, who was not residing in the United States since January 20th, 2021, who is inadmissible under Section 212A3 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, or INA, or removable under Section 237A4 of the INA, who has been convicted of a felony or 2 or more misdemeanors committed in the United States, or who meets the criteria set forth in Section 208B2A of the INA. Next slide, please. Continuing on with persons not covered under DED, persons who were deported, excluded, or removed prior to January 20th, 2021, who is subject to extradition, whose presence in the United States the Secretary of Homeland Security has determined is not in the interest of the United States or poses a danger to public safety, or whose presence in the United States the Secretary of State has reasonable grounds to believe would have serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. Next slide, please. Required documentation. There is no application for deferred enforced departure or DED. However, to obtain employment authorization, applicants will need to submit Form I-765 along with proof of identity, nationality, and eligibility for DED. The following documents can be used to establish nationality and identity: passport, birth certificate with photo ID, or national identity document with photo and/or fingerprints. Next slide, please. EAD applicants will also need to establish their presence and continuous residence in the United States. The following non-exhaustive list of documents can be used to establish presence and continuous residence: passport, passport entries, Form I-94 arrival departure record, employment records, rent receipts, utility bills such as gas, electric, telephone, etc., or letters from companies showing dates when the applicant received service, money order receipts for money sent in or out of the United States. Next slide, please. Continuing on, birth certificates of children born in the United States, correspondence between the applicant and others, Social Security card, bank books with dated transactions, selective service card, attestations by churches, unions, or other organizations of the applicant's residence, and affidavits. You may need to provide more than one of these above types of documentation to establish your continuous residency.
Next slide, please. The following slides are about TPS for Venezuelans. TPS allows certain Venezuelan nationals or individuals without nationality who last resided in Venezuela, who are already in the United States, to remain in the United States because of extraordinary and temporary conditions in Venezuela that prevent their safe return. Next slide, please. On March 9th, 2021, Secretary Mayorkas designated Venezuela for TPS for 18 months. The registration period began March 9 2021, and continues through September 5, 2021. The notice can be found in the Federal Register at 86 FR 13574. Next slide, please. Individuals must meet the following requirements to be eligible to apply for TPS Venezuela: be a national of Venezuela or an individual without nationality who last habitually resided in Venezuela, continuously physically present in the United States beginning on March 9, 2021, and continuously resided in the United States since March 8, 2021. Next slide, please. Applicants must properly complete and file Form I-821, application for temporary protective status. Applicants must also file evidence of identity and nationality, evidence of date of entry, and evidence of continuous residence. General Form I-821 filing instructions, as well as instructions specific to TPS Venezuela, are available at uscis.gov/I-821. We recommend that you review the instructions for the Form I-821 and also the information on the website before filing with USCIS. Continuing, please, next slide. There are various factors that can make an applicant ineligible for TPS. Applicants are not eligible if they have been convicted of any felony or 2 or more misdemeanors committed in the United States, are found inadmissible as an immigrant under applicable grounds in the INA Section 212A, including non-waivable criminal and security-related grounds, subject to any mandatory bars to asylum, fail to meet requirements for continuous physical presence and continuous residence in the United States, or do not register during the 180-day registration period set in the Federal Register notice. USCIS will review a TPS application in its entirety to determine if the applicant is eligible. Next slide, please. Applicants may demonstrate Venezuelan nationality by submitting an unexpired Venezuelan passport, a Venezuelan certificate of naturalization, a Venezuelan national identity card, cédula de identidad, or any other national identity document from Venezuela bearing a photo and/or fingerprint. If applicants cannot obtain a primary evidence document, they can submit other credible evidence to demonstrate Venezuelan nationality and explain to USCIS, for example, in response to a request for evidence or at an interview, why they are not able to submit primary evidence. In general, if applicants are not able to access primary documentation and submit secondary evidence, USCIS will evaluate that evidence and determine if they have met their burden of proof. Slide, please. An eligible Venezuelan applicant must demonstrate to USCIS that he or she has been continuously physically present in the United States since March 9, 2021. When determining continuous physical presence, continuous residence, USCIS must consider the applicant's time outside of the United States after March 9, 2021, absences from the United States that were brief, casual, and innocent are acceptable. An absence that was brief, temporary trip abroad required by an emergency or extenuating circumstances outside the control of the applicant will also not break continuous residence. Applicants should also submit any evidence showing continuous residence in the United States since March 8, 2021. Residence means that applicant's place of general abode. The place of general abode means their principal actual dwelling, place in fact, without regard to intent. Slide, please. The Form I-821 filing instructions list evidence that can show continuous physical presence. For example, an applicant may provide copies of all passport pages with non-immigrant visa, admission or parole stamps, income tax records, utility bills, birth, marriage, and their certificates for immediate family members, bank records, or school records, to name a few. Again, this list is not exhaustive. USCIS will evaluate and weigh any evidence submitted. If someone does not have evidence of arrival or departure dates, when asked for what alternative evidence might work to demonstrate this information, applicants should submit the best evidence they have. For example, they may submit copies of all passports showing departure and arrivals, Form I-94, or receipts for airplane tickets. Applicants can also provide information at their interviews about their arrivals and departures. USCIS officers will also check available systems to help confirm information submitted by applicants. Next slide, please. To qualify for TPS, applicants must be admissible to the United States. If an applicant is inadmissible, the law may allow them to apply for a waiver or other form of relief that can overcome the grounds of inadmissibility. Slide, please. The following grounds of inadmissibility that do not apply to TPS applicants include, but are not limited to, public charge, INA 212A4, labor certification, INA 212A5, aliens present without admission or parole, INA 212A6A, and documentation requirements, INA 212A7A.
How to apply. Applicants who are currently in the United States and meet the eligibility requirements may file Form I-821 application for temporary protected status. Each applicant must submit their own application. There is no derivative TPS status. USCIS must receive applications on or before September 5th, 2021. The I-821 fee is $50. A biometric services fee of $85 also required for applicants 14 and older. Applicants may also file a Form I-765 application for employment authorization. The associated filing fee is $410 for applicants between 14 and 65 years of age. See the Forms I-821 and I-765 pages at uscis.gov to download the forms and for the further instructions. Eligible applicants may submit a fee waiver request using Form I-912, Request for Fee Waiver. Next slide, please. This slide shows a screenshot of the Form I-821. Make sure to download and file the most recent version of Forms I-821 and I-765 at uscis.gov. Additional forms. Applicants who would like to travel abroad may file a Form I-131 application for travel documents. There is an associated filing fee of $575. There are no fee waivers for this application. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, CBP, can still deny admission at a U.S. port of entry to someone who has a Form I-512, which is the advanced parole document issued when Form I-131 is approved. Applicants with a pending TPS application are eligible to apply for employment authorization document. Applicants must file Form I-765, application for employment authorization, to request an employment authorization document. Applicants may file a Form I-765 concurrently with their TPS application while the TPS application is pending with USCIS or after the TPS application has been approved. If you submit a Form I-765 after filing Form I-821, submit a copy of your I-821 receipt notice as evidence the I-821 is pending, or if your I-821 has been approved, submit a copy of the approval notice. For family members, there is no derivative TPS status, meaning each eligible member of a family must submit his or her own Form I-821. Filing tips. Don't wait to file. The filing deadline is September 5th, 2021. We must receive TPS applications by that date and not have rejected them. Applications must be postmarked on or before September 5th, 2021. Applicants must sign their forms. We will reject and return any unsigned forms. Use the most current form version. USCIS forms are available for download from our website. We recommend that individuals complete forms electronically and then print them to submit. Read the form instructions carefully. Complete the entire form. Update the applicant's address with USCIS if the address changes. The two most common mistakes on TPS applications are submitting an incorrect filing fee and not signing the form. TPS status. TPS beneficiaries are authorized to remain in the United States and may work during the designation period as long as they have a valid employment authorization document. If Venezuela is not extended for TPS, or if a beneficiary does not maintain TPS, the beneficiary will revert to the immigration status he or she had before TPS. If a TPS beneficiary was granted a different status during the TPS designation period, then the individual will keep that status when TPS ends, provided that he or she remains eligible for that other status. TPS versus DED. An employment authorization document, or EAD, issued under DED will expire on July 20th, 2022, while an EAD issued under TPS will expire on September 9th, 2022. DED can only be extended by the President, and TPS can only be extended by the Secretary of Homeland Security. There is no guarantee that DED will necessarily be extended, even if TPS may be extended. You may wish to consult with a private immigration attorney or accredited representative to determine whether you should apply for TPS, even if you are presently covered by DED.
Great, thanks, Lauren. So before we move on to the Q&A portion, we just wanted to highlight some of our self-help tools and resources. On our uscis.gov webpage, we offer many free services, such as the ability to check your case status, update your address, and check processing times. Also, our website has a general TPS page as well as a dedicated page for Venezuela where you can find a lot of the information that we shared with you today. Additionally, our multimedia team is creating a new video to explain the TPS and DED for Venezuelans. So once this video is complete, it's going to be shared on all of our social media platforms as well as posted to the USCIS YouTube channel. It will be available in English with Spanish captions. So that is something that we are very excited about and hopefully will be very helpful in being able to spread more information about these two programs. And then lastly, we want to make sure that everyone on today's webinar is aware of our Avoid Scams page, where you can learn more about common immigration scams, how to report them, and also how to find legal services and help. It's an unfortunate reality that whenever there are new programs to help immigrants, people may try to take advantage. So please remember that the wrong help can hurt. If you're not familiar with our Avoid Scams page, please check it out. So we just want to take a moment to thank all of our presenters for the information that they shared today on TPS and DED Venezuela. So now we're going to move into the Q&A session and take questions from the webinar Q&A box. So if you have a question, please go ahead and post it in the Q&A box and we will try to address as many as possible. So we do ask that you limit your questions to today's topic, which is TPS and DED for Venezuela. We are only able to address questions on this topic, and we are unable to answer any case-specific questions. So again, please use the Q&A box for questions. It's not for comments or general feedback, but if you do have comments or general feedback, we welcome that at our public engagement mailbox. And that email address, again, is public.engagement@uscis.dhs.gov. So we are going to start with some of the pre-submitted questions that came in for today's webinar. And my colleague, Kate, is going to help. So we're going to start here. Let's see. So we have a question that came in. Is there an exception to the continuous residence physical presence requirement for people who arrived at the U.S. border before March 8th, 2021, but who were forced to wait in Mexico under the Migrant Protection Protocols, also known as Remain in Mexico? If no exception currently exists, do we anticipate one in the future?
Thank you, Emmy. And I believe this question was also in the chat a few times. So there is currently no exception for individuals who were enrolled in MPP. Individuals applying to TPS for Venezuela must have been continuously physically present in the United States since March 9th, 2021, and continuously residing in the United States since March 8th, 2021.
Great, thank you. So moving on to another question that came in. Can I apply for TPS without affecting my asylum claim? I already have a work permit and was fingerprinted. Would I have to pay for a work permit and to be fingerprinted again?
So individuals who have a pending or approved asylum claim may apply for TPS. All TPS applicants must pay the required fees or submit a request for a fee waiver using Form I-912.
Okay, so may a person who was born in a third country, who lived all of their life in Venezuela, but never obtained Venezuelan citizenship, apply for TPS?
No. Eligible nationals of Venezuela or individuals having no nationality who last habitually resided in Venezuela may submit an initial registration application under the designation of Venezuela for TPS and apply for an EAD.
Okay, so does the fact that a Venezuelan resided in a country other than Venezuela prior to entering the United States make him or her ineligible for TPS?
Thanks, Emmy. I think we also received this question in the chat today as well. So if an individual firmly resettled in another country prior to arriving in the United States, they would not be eligible for TPS. Eligible nationals of Venezuela or individuals having no nationality who last habitually resided in Venezuela may submit an initial registration application under the designation of Venezuela for TPS and apply for an EAD. However, an individual is ineligible for TPS if he or she has firmly resettled in another country prior to arriving in the U.S.
Great. Okay, so how about a person whose special visa is expiring? Can they apply for TPS?
Yes, they can. Individuals with an expiring visa may apply for TPS, provided that they meet all of the eligibility criteria for TPS.
Okay. Okay, so what about a person with a tourist visa? Would they lose their tourist visa if they apply for TPS?
No, they won't lose their visa. Registration for TPS does not prevent individuals from applying for or maintaining a non-immigrant status.
Okay, so if multiple members of a family are applying for TPS, should they pay for each application separately, or could they send a check for the lump sum of all of the applications?
USCIS encourages each family member to file their own application with a separate payment.
Okay, so if I have children under the age of 14, do they have to pay the EAD fees?
Children younger than 14 are not required to pay the Form I-765 fee. For more information on those TPS-related filing fees, you can visit our website, uscis.gov/I-821.
So what would be the total fee amount for 2 children under 12, including EAD fees, to apply?
So children younger than 14 must pay a $50 fee for Form I-821, or they may submit a request for a fee waiver using Form I-912. But they're not required to pay the Form I-765 fee or biometric services fee. The total amount is $100 in this example. USCIS encourages each family member to file their own application with a separate payment. And then for more information on TPS-related filing fees, you can visit our webpage that I just mentioned, but we'll repeat it here again, uscis.gov/I-821.
Okay, so another question that came in. Do I need to list the countries I transited through on my way from Venezuela to the US?
So, Emmy, TPS applicants should list all of the countries they entered while traveling to the United States, including any countries where they resided, as well as those where they transited through.
Good to know. So when you come from a country other than Venezuela, what documents or requirements do you have to provide to apply for TPS?
Thanks, Emmy. So individuals applying for TPS under the Venezuela designation must be nationals of Venezuela or individuals having no nationality who last habitually resided in Venezuela, have been continuously physically present in the United States since March 9th, 2021, and have been continuously residing in the United States since March 8th, 2021. Examples of documents that individuals may submit to establish their nationality and identity include copies of any of the following: passports, birth certificates accompanied by photo identification, or national identity documents from their country of origin bearing a photo and/or fingerprints. Examples of documents that individuals may submit to establish physical presence and continuous residence include copies of any of the following: passport, a Form I-94 arrival departure record, employment records, rent receipts, utility bills, passport entries, bank books with dated transactions, a selective service card, attestations by churches, unions, or other organizations of the applicant's residence, affidavits, money orders or receipts for money sent in or out of the U.S., birth certificates of children born in the United States, correspondence between the applicant and others, and/or a Social Security card.
Okay, so if a family is applying for TPS, do you recommend that every family member apply simultaneously?
So TPS is an individual benefit and provides no benefit to derivatives. Family members may apply for TPS simultaneously or individually, provided that each individual meet the eligibility criteria for TPS independently. USCIS encourages each family member to file their own application with a separate payment.
So what about people with Venezuelan residency, like Venezuelan green card holders? Are they able to apply for TPS Venezuela?
Not unless they are a Venezuelan national or an individual without nationality who last habitually resided in Venezuela. Eligible nationals of Venezuela or individuals having no nationality who last habitually resided in Venezuela may submit an initial registration application under the designation of Venezuela for TPS and apply for an EAD.
So if a Venezuelan was in the U.S. last year, but was not present in the U.S. on March 8th, 2021, however, re-entered the U.S. on April 1st, 2021, for example, is this person eligible for TPS?
So TPS applicants under the Venezuela designation must demonstrate that they have been continuously physically present in the U.S. since March 9th, 2021.
If a Venezuelan is in the U.S. on a P1 visa, athlete visa, can they apply for TPS?
Registration for TPS does not prevent individuals from applying for or maintaining a non-immigrant status.
Can someone with TPS status qualify for financial aid to go to school, college?
So USCIS recommends that TPS beneficiaries contact their school for questions related to whether they are eligible for financial aid.
Can someone with TPS get a driver's license?
USCIS recommends that TPS beneficiaries contact their local Department of Motor Vehicles for information on how they may apply for a driver's license.
For a question concerning the date my authorized period of stay in the U.S. expired, should I use the date my I-94 expired or the date my work permit expires?
Please provide the date your authorized period of stay expired as shown on your Form I-94.
How should one respond to the question about current immigration status in interview if I have applied for asylum?
Thanks, Emmy. I think we've also received this question in the chat. So please provide your current immigration status or lack of status. For example, visitor, student, visa overstay, or no status.
Will advanced parole be available for Venezuelan DED holders?
USCIS will process requests for advanced parole, Form I-131, application for travel document, for individuals with DED. All right, so Emmy, we have some additional questions and we'll continue if that's okay with you. So is a Venezuelan nationality certificate issued by the embassy in the US for the express purpose of seeking TPS an acceptable way to establish nationality?
So any national identity document from the country of origin bearing a photo and or fingerprint is acceptable.
Great. Maybe immigration detention apply for TPS?
USCIS may consider TPS applications from individuals who are currently in immigration detention. An individual in removal proceedings at the time of the foreign state's designation may submit an application to USCIS. If an individual is in removal proceedings and the basis of the NTA, notice to appear, is a mandatory ground for TPS ineligibility, EOIR would have jurisdiction to adjudicate the TPS application.
Okay, thank you. And here we have a question from the chat. Are expired passports acceptable forms of identification for establishing nationality and identity?
Yeah, so we got this question a lot. It did come pre-submitted and it's popped up a lot in the chat. So yes, expired passports are acceptable to establish nationality and identity. And I'll go ahead and repeat that. Expired passports are acceptable to establish nationality and identity.
Thank you. And I believe we've also received this next question several times as well. Would holding dual nationality make someone ineligible or bar them from TPS? Many Venezuelans also have European citizenship and travel on the passport for that country.
Yeah, this is a question that has come up. So irrespective of whatever additional foreign citizenships individuals may hold, they are eligible for TPS if they establish that they are a national of the TPS country and meet all other eligibility requirements. So one more time, irrespective of whatever additional foreign citizenships individuals may hold, you're eligible for TPS if you establish that you are a national of Venezuela and meet all of the other eligibility requirements.
Thank you. And our next question, do the provisions of visa waiver entries deprive a person with dual citizenship of eligibility for TPS if they entered under the visa waiver program?
So individuals who entered the United States under the visa waiver may apply for TPS provided that they meet all of the eligibility criteria for TPS.
Okay, thank you. If an applicant has dual nationality, is it correct that USCIS will grant TPS to qualified individuals who entered the US using their Venezuelan passport nationality and deny TPS to an individual who entered on a non-Venezuelan passport?
So same answer to a differently worded question, but yes, irrespective of whatever additional foreign citizenships individuals may hold and which passport was used to enter the US, they are eligible for TPS if they establish that they are a national of the TPS country.
Great, thank you. And here's another question I know we've received several times. How do DED and TPS differ?
Yeah, we do get this question a lot. So DED is an administrative stay of removal that the president can make for a group of individuals in his or her constitutional authority to conduct foreign relations. TPS designations can be made in the Secretary of Homeland Security's discretion if he or her determines that the conditions in the country satisfy the statutory standard. Unlike TPS, DED has no statutory basis. Although individuals covered by a grant of DED will not be removed from the United States, they are not considered to have an immigration status.
Thank you. Why did the Secretary of Homeland Security designate Venezuela for TPS when many Venezuelans were already covered by DED?
Another good question. So DED protects eligible Venezuelans from removal and permits them to apply for an employment authorization document, EAD, but DED, again, is not an immigration status. Although the populations covered by DED and eligible for TPS significantly overlap, Venezuelans' designation for TPS provides these individuals with a statutorily based immigration status supported by a legal framework for periodically assessing and determining whether the conditions in Venezuela continue to necessitate this form of temporary protection.
Great, thank you. And here we have another good question. With TPS, what's the difference between the March 8th continuous residence and March 9th continuous physical presence?
So the applicant must prove that they have continued to reside in the United States since a date designated by the Secretary of DHS. So in this case, March 8th. Think of this as they could show they have a utility bill dated on or before March 8th to show they reside here, not that they just happen to be here for a quick trip. For continuous physical presence, the applicant must be present in the United States on or before the effective date, March 9th, to be considered eligible for TPS.
Thank you. And here we have a question about forms and fees. So what application forms and application fees are required to register for TPS?
So to register for TPS based on the designation of Venezuela, individuals must submit Form I-821, application for temporary protected status, and pay the filing fee, or submit Form I-912, requests for fee waiver. Individuals may be required to pay the biometric service fee. Although not required to do so, if they want to obtain an employment authorization document, an EAD, valid through September 7th, 2021, they must file Form I-765, application for employment authorization, and pay the Form I-765 fee, or submit a Form I-912 request for fee waiver. If they do not want to request an EAD now, they may also file Form I-765 at a later date and pay the fee or request a fee waiver, provided that they still have TPS or a pending TPS application. For more information on the application forms and fees for TPS, you can visit the USCIS TPS webpage, and that is uscis.gov/TPS. Fees for the Form I-821, the Form I-765, and biometric services are also described in 8 CFR 103.7 B1I.
Great, thanks. And here we have another question about fees. Is the biometric services fee required for TPS?
Yes. Biometrics such as fingerprints are required for all applicants 14 years of age and older. Those applicants must submit a biometric services fee. However, individuals who are unable to pay the biometric services fee may complete Form